Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting edition of the Coach U Show. If you're an agency, if you're trying to scale your agency, if you want to understand what is inside the mind of an 8-figure agency owner, today you are in luck. The reason you are here is you're going to learn from Howard Tiersky. He runs From Digital. He's got the best-selling book in the Wall Street Journal on winning digital customers. And I've got 2 boxes of his books, by the way, that have been distributed.
Is that a good thing or a bad sign if you've got 2 boxes sitting around?
Well, I could probably kill someone with the weight of these books. But seriously, agency owners who are struggling, especially to get from 1 million to 10 million, they need to hear, how does Howard operate? I've been watching him over the years, and he's not stuck in the day-to-day. He's hired up a team of, how many people do you have now?
About 100 people.
And a lot of them are in the Philippines.
About a third are in the Philippines.
They're in the Philippines. That's fantastic. And he's got name brand clients. I mean, look at what he's done with Avis and Universal and Morgan Stanley and some of these huge companies. And the reason why you're here today is you want to learn how he's doing this, how he's organizing, how he's hiring VAs. So stay tuned, everybody. Howard, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Dennis. I always love hanging out with you.
And we were hanging out in New York. Was it just a month ago?
Yeah,
and,
I guess. Yeah.
And you brought in the who's who in marketing thought leadership. David Meerman Scott, Shep Hyken, Michelle McKenna, the list goes on. And we were at your offices in New York, which is what you call the Innovation Loft.
Yeah.
How is the Innovation Loft part of your agency?
Well, it's a space we bring clients for collaborative work sessions. So a lot of times we'll bring people there for anywhere from a half day to a couple of days and run like a really creative brainstorming, planning, prioritizing type session. And I always find it's great to get, as you know, you were there. It's a very creative environment. There's toys and all kinds of crazy stuff and screens everywhere and big rolling whiteboards. And I always find it's great to get people out of their normal day-to-day environments to put them someplace that feels just totally different and hopefully inspiring. And then put them with great collaborators, including people from our clients and people from our team, and sometimes others as well, to go through that process of figuring out what's next. And once you do that for a few days, even if you go back to the next 3 months or 6 months of operating in more of a traditional way, you've got the energy and you got the vision and you got the plans that came out of that exciting, inspiring collaborative time. So that's a lot of what we do there.
When I went to your office for the first time and I saw the whiteboards, and I saw your process when all of us came there that one morning and you had us brainstorm and map out who we were and who we represented and who we wanted to be. I felt like I can see why clients that are looking to do digital transformation get so much value out of that. But just out of curiosity, what does it cost per month to rent a whole floor in Midtown Manhattan?
I think our rent's about $30,000 a month, something like that.
But for a city block, I mean, that's not quite a city block, is it? But it's a huge.
Oh,
space.
No. We're not the whole block. We're a floor of the building, but the building we're in is not the whole block by any means. So there's a hotel, there's other stuff on the block.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, how do you, most people will look at you and they'll say, okay, so when you have a client like Universal Studios, and you build those relationships, you can then use that to get the NFL and you can use that to get other sorts of clients. But how do you get to having that first enterprise client if it's just you and a few people and you're doing some local clients or you're just starting out? How did you go? Because everyone had to start out from nothing before they got to these big clients.
Well, in my case, I was working for a large consulting firm for many years, for Ernst & Young Consulting, and then that was purchased by Capgemini. So then I was with Capgemini for a few years. And so I left there with a lot of experience working with that type of company and with relationships. So that was a little bit of a leg up that I had. But when I started my company, I was going from a company that I think at the time was like 30, 40,000 employees. I think Capgemini now is like 300,000 employees or whatever. They've grown tremendously. But even then, it was like I was going from this company of 30,000 employees to a company of 5 employees. And, over time, of course, we grew. And I know sometimes people would ask me, well, how does a small company like that compete with Accenture or Deloitte or McKinsey or these kind of big companies? Because we do compete with those companies. And of course, you can't compete head to head. You can't say, well, compare me to Accenture and like on the merits say who's a better company. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's like, it's like comparing my local diner to the country of France. I mean, it's not even, where would you begin? But one of the things that I had learned even at my prior work with Capgemini and Ernst & Young is you don't really, in our business anyway, when you're an agency, you're not really competing with other companies. You don't compete with companies. You bring a team to the table for a possible project to a client, and your competitor brings a team to the table that's being pitched, and you're not competing with the company. Your team is competing with their team. And so all of a sudden, if the client, and I've had occasion, I don't have the situation come up much now anymore, but if a client ever says to me, well, how can your company of 100 people compete with a company of 100,000 people? I just say, well, how many people do you think you need on this project? I'm thinking, let's say it's 7 people.
Yeah.
So what do you care if I have 100 people or 100,000 people? All that matters is if I have the right 7 people. And by the way, when I used to work for a giant company and I would have a client and I'd want to sell a project, sometimes I couldn't get the right 7 people, not because they didn't exist at the company, but because they weren't available. And so I often found myself not able to put together the right 7 people, even though the company had 30, 40,000 employees. And so, it's all about being able to deliver the right thing to that client that they need at that point in time. And if you can do that, then there's no reason why you can't compete with other companies, larger companies. So I think the key to being able to do business with any client, including large enterprises, is to make sure you understand their needs. So you can then bring them something that's of value to them. And if you can bring them something that's of equal or more value to what your competitors do, then why shouldn't they hire you? They probably will, or at least you have a good chance.
Yeah. How is being small, nimble, and boutique an advantage? Is it like, do you see that the CMO of these clients, they have a closer relationship with you, or they see that you move faster, or there's a price advantage?
Yeah, I think all of those things. I think there is a price advantage. Big companies have a lot of overhead typically. They tend to have a lot of waste. They tend to have a lot of bloat. And we have a lot less. So that does put us in a position to be able to price a little more aggressively if need be. We're not that much less expensive than much larger companies are, frankly, but sometimes just being a little less expensive helps. So that's one area. When I was with Capgemini at one point running the digital practice for Capgemini, there were, 400 or 500 projects going on under my area of responsibility. So imagine how much time I could give to each of those projects. I mean, for many projects, the answer was 0. Imagine how much time I could spend. Sometimes I just fly someplace to meet with a client and shake their hand, but I wouldn't think about them or their project again for the next 6 months because, again, hundreds of clients, right? So you're just sort of trying to figure out where to be, building the capabilities. But, as a leader, I wasn't set up to be able to really provide a lot of personal attention to my clients. And, the model in a lot of big services companies, whether you're talking about an accounting firm or a law firm or anything, is try to push work down to the most junior person who can possibly do the work so that your most senior people can oversee as much work as possible. And that makes sense from a business perspective. And of course, it's beneficial to the client too, to the degree that, like I have an attorney, I pay him a ton of money. I don't want him to do stuff that his paralegal can do for half the rate. I'm happy for him to give the work to the paralegal.
Yeah.
But there's a certain point when that becomes counterproductive. If all of a sudden the paralegal is the one giving me strategic legal advice, then it's like, well, wait a minute. Now I'm not getting the value that I signed up for. So that's the risk at large companies. And any client that's dealing with these large companies needs to be constantly on the lookout for making sure that they're not getting leveraged so much that they're just 90% of all the work's being done by kids 2 years out of college who may not be providing the right strategic, focus and leadership on what's being done. So when we're smaller, we're able to provide more of that direct strategic thinking to all of our clients. And so I have the luxury of being able to do more of that. Now I deal with, in any given year, maybe 20 clients or 25 clients, not hundreds of clients, which still means that a lot of other people have to do a lot of the work. But I can all of a sudden say, yeah, I'm going to show up for 3 days and just focus for 3 days on client X and really get strategic with them. And then there may be other times that they don't need that. Now we've got the strategy. Now there's a bunch of execution that needs to be done. I'm not so valuable. People are writing code, building apps, things like that. but they're still getting that level of strategic oversight that you'd like to think you'd get everywhere, but in truth, it's variable.
How did you get out of the operations? Because when you're small, you are the account manager and you have other people start to do account things. You handle more strategy, relationship level things. But talk to me about how you're able to get to that point where you're not having to be so, like, all of us are trying to extricate ourselves from the day-to-day operations. How do you delegate things out to the team that's doing all the tasks and building websites and building apps and whatnot without the clients feeling like you're not involved or you don't care?
Yeah. First of all, again, I had the advantage of coming from large consulting. So large consulting probably has the opposite, errs in the opposite direction, as we were just talking about, but I had a lot of models for that, role models, and I saw operationally how that was done. So again, it was most natural to me to be delegating rather than trying to take on everything myself. Now, having said that, when we first started the company and we had one client, our first client, and as you say, I was, running the account and it was taking all my time. And, I had one colleague who started the company with me, and I said to her, okay, you're the project manager. She was very senior, so more like program manager over everything that happens at this account. And I'm going to be there all the time too, but I'm going to focus on strategic stuff. You focus on making sure, the trains run on time, making sure everything gets done, on, keeping track. So I don't have to have my head in all the mechanics. I can be thinking strategically about the actual solution that we're building for this client. So that was the first piece of delegation, even within a client, to make sure I wasn't both trying to essentially project manage and account manage everything and be the strategic thinker. Even at that time, though, I was focusing almost all my time on that. And then, some of it just winds up being necessity. We're sitting there at our first client at that moment. That was 100% of all of our revenue and 100% of all of our employees were working only on this one client. And it was a big project. So I had already 25 people or so working on the project. And I realized that this project's not going to last forever. And we need to be looking for our next client. You can't just run one. Eventually, projects have a natural life cycle. And even if you have ongoing work at an account, this was the type of project where we're building a whole new e-commerce ticketing web solution for, in that case, it was Universal Studios theme parks. But we knew, of course, that it wasn't going to be at that level of spend or even near forever. Fortunately, it did go for a couple of years or 18 months or something. It was a big project, but not forever. So I looked out in my network and I hired another account person. And I said, okay, you're joining a new company. We've only got one client. We haven't even put our first project live. I'm focusing all of my time on this one client. Your job is to go find us the next 3 clients. And I can give you about 1 hour a week of my time. The rest of it is dedicated to this one client. That's the job, And so fortunately, someone jumped into that job and, she's still with me running a lot of our largest accounts, but she took on a difficult task. And she did, in fact, get us our next few clients with some, maybe more of my help than an hour a week, but not that much of my help. And before you know it, we had 3 clients or 4 clients, and so on from there.
Biggest challenge I hear from other agency owners is, how do you find great people? So how did you find this other person who's willing to step into a risky situation where they don't have time with you? And if they don't find the next 3 clients, then your revenues go down.
Well, there's no question that finding great people is a great challenge. And I struggle with it all the time. And if I look at my best people, everyone has a different story about how I found them or how they found me. In the case of the person that I just mentioned, Debbie, who runs many of our accounts, at that time, and some of the techniques I started this company 15 years ago. So some of the things that were killer techniques then for finding great people may not be as effective today. But at the time, I reached out on my LinkedIn network and I sent messages to a couple hundred people saying, I started this company and I was looking for someone like this profile. I was referred by somebody who I barely knew, but who was in LinkedIn connection, who connected us together. And that's how I found her. I didn't know at that time what was going to happen. I didn't know if she was going to be wildly successful or she'd be with me for 3 months, sell nothing and quit. So it wasn't like it was immediately certain to be a success. Of course, it's been a huge success, but I've also hired people that I had huge enthusiasm for. And 3 or 6 months later, they were leaving, they were quitting, or I was firing them because it just didn't work out. They weren't driving success. So there is an element of yield of finding people who you think are going to be great and being willing to take some risks. And I remember even when I hired Debbie, it felt like a big risk to me because, I was going to start paying her immediately and money wasn't going to start coming in from her work immediately. So of course, for the next period of time, I was going to be making less money because I'm paying this money out in hopes that it will yield future money. And at the time, that felt like a risk. So you have to be willing to take a certain amount of risk, finding people and bringing them in, hoping that they will be successful. And a combination of, and I don't have any magic formula for it, but figuring out how to assess which people are really going to be winners for you. I know you have all kinds of techniques for trying to figure out how to evaluate people and figure out, which ones have the aptitude and the motivation and the, other factors. And then being willing, though, to know that, you're never going to know for sure. So you have to be willing to just take some risks and see it as a portfolio. And I've hired plenty of people over the years that didn't work out as well.
It's almost like dating. They can look good.
I guess, I've been married for over 25 years, so I don't remember it too well.
Are there particular gotchas that you look for before you make the commitment to hire somebody? Certain red flags or certain X factors you're looking to see?
Yeah, well, the number one thing I look for is probably intelligence. And I just feel like, when you're speaking to somebody, you can kind of tell if you ask a question, and are they giving you like a lot of mumbo jumbo back? Are they throwing around a lot of terms, but you can't follow what they're saying? Or are they speaking plainly and giving you like a clear, intelligent answer? I like to just engage people and talk about trends in digital transformation, or what are the most important things, a company in this industry needs to be thinking about today, or whatever else. And I just want to hear how they think. It doesn't even matter if I agree with their answers. I just want to understand like how they can engage and how they think. So I think that's one of the things that I look for. And, kind of like attitude and mindset. I mean, we have a certain culture at my company, and we have a lot of very positive people. There's not a lot of like politics or whatnot. We're looking for people who want to engage and make an impact and do great work for clients and collaborate. And, not everybody's showing up with that kind of agenda. So we try to ascertain that as best we can in an interview. And I think we're pretty successful on that, actually, and hiring people who seem like they'd be a cultural fit. Of course, we make mistakes once in a while, but if we make a mistake, it's usually not for that reason. It's usually for other reasons.
Now, you've hired 30 or 40 virtual assistants from the Philippines and other places. Talk to me about what was the impetus for that? What was it like hiring your first VA, and then what happened from there?
Well, first of all, I don't use this term virtual assistants, and not to quibble on terminology, but I don't really understand. I certainly understand the idea of a virtual assistant, at least. Well, I have my own impression of what it means. And to me, it means somebody who's kind of like an administrative assistant, right? Someone who's going to help you schedule things and, respond, keep your calendar, whatnot. I don't have anybody in the Philippines, maybe there's one person, but who has that more or less that profile of what their job is.
Yeah. Well, that's the role. We call it VA. I'm the world's most famous VA, because anyone who works in digital is a VA by definition, right?
Well, again, listen,
international teammates, other nicer words.
Yeah, but the people that we have in the Philippines, they are creative designers, they are software developers, they are copywriters, they are video editors, they are project managers, they are business analysts, they are researchers. These are the main skills that we hire for. And so I wouldn't call those roles, if I hired them in the United States, a virtual assistant. You know what I mean? So I don't think that, we don't use that term, is all I'm saying. But yes, that's, we have a team there now who are doing all of those kinds of things, both for our clients and also in support of many of our internal activities, such as our marketing, our thought leadership, sales outreach, things like that.
So I think you had approached me years ago saying that you wanted to hire John Jonas calls it an OFS, an online Filipino specialist, because as we know, VA is the word that is just, it's always been the word, even though we'd rather have a higher level status. But maybe if you can recall our conversations about getting you an offshore, what does he call it? Online Filipino specialist. That's what he uses in all his emails now.
Now, someday you're going to have to explain to me why Filipino is spelled with an F, but the Philippines is spelled with a PH.
Yeah.
That doesn't, I don't get that. But anyway, yeah, well, originally my vision was we were like the shoemaker's children when it came to our marketing and our own website and things like that, in that because we're a design agency, because we're in the digital business, all of our resources would get sucked up with the work that we're doing for our clients, which is not a bad thing. It's great that business is growing and our clients always have more needs. But all of a sudden, we'd have a goal of getting certain material out or updating the website or whatever else, and it wasn't getting done, and it wasn't getting done. And the reason is because all these resources are getting pulled for client work. And, when a client needs something, it's hard to argue, no, our website needs to come first. And finally, I said, okay, I need a separate team who's just going to focus on our internal marketing. And if our client billable people have time and can also work on that stuff, great. But I'm going to see that as a bonus, not as the main way I get things done, because, well, I tried that and it wasn't working. But I'm also thinking, oh, geez, when I hire normally a designer or a copywriter that's going to build clients, well, they're going to make me money. So I don't mind paying higher rates, because if I can hire somebody for price X and build them out to the client at X plus a good percentage, then it doesn't matter how much paying that person. Hiring that person is essentially creating more revenue. But when I hire people who aren't going to build clients, they're just a cost to the business, I get a little more like, how do I do this as inexpensively as possible? And so that's what led me to think, okay, well, I'd like an offshore team. We'd had great success for many years doing software development offshore, not in the Philippines, primarily in Peru, Ecuador, Romania, India, sometimes China, other places. But that was really mostly, again, software engineering. And I was like, yeah, but what we need is these other skills: design, project management, business analysis, copywriting. And so that was the goal. An experiment was to go hire, I think the original goal was 5 people. And, I think that's probably what I first came to you with. It's been a long time already. And just to do the internal stuff, that was the goal. And so I think you had said to me at the time, well, go on onlinejobs.ph and put an ad and find one person who will be your cornerstone person, and then let that person go figure out how to hire the other people. So that's exactly what I did. I found one awesome guy, Mark, and he built me out a team of about, at the time, I think 6-ish people to start doing that type of, let's call it internal work in the Philippines. And so that was really successful, except one problem occurred, which is that as soon as we got this team running, the account managers for our clients said, "You've got these people in the Philippines now, don't you? Well, actually, I need 2 more designers to work on this other client project. Can I steal a couple of those people to work on this other project?" And I'd be like, we built this team just to avoid this problem. These guys were supposed to be working on internal projects. But they're like, well, but, client deadline, or whatever. So all of a sudden, those folks started getting pulled onto client projects. So rather than just tearing my hair out and declaring it a failure in that regard, I said, okay, fine. You need those people? Mark, go find me 5 more people, right? And so in that way, making sure that we had enough people to deal with our internal stuff, but seeing that over time, there was more and more demand for these resources on our client projects as well, because they were really talented. We just continued to add more and more people. And so we just sort of, I don't want to say unintentionally, but it wasn't sort of the main initial goal. We wound up hiring more and more people. And now most of the people in the Philippines are working on client projects. And we probably at any given time still have maybe 6, 7, 8 people who are working on our internal stuff. So at least now we are getting that work done. It's not been an endless, never getting that work done. So that work is getting done not more successfully, but actually the majority of people there are actually also working on our client projects.
Howard, what do you think is the biggest surprise with working with people on the other side of the planet? Because there are different time zones. There's slight cultural barriers. You have Mark, who's there kind of intermediary, but you have a remote team and you have all the challenges that come with a remote team. I think my biggest surprise was because I've been working with people all over the planet for decades, but just mostly in software engineering. So I think my biggest pleasant surprise was the design talent that we were able to find in the Philippines. And it's a funny thing about different countries I've noticed. For example, we had one time a big software development team in Lima, Peru. And I wanted to add designers, like UX designers, web designers to that team. And man, we just struggled and struggled. And it was like we couldn't find good design talent in Lima. I don't know why. We just couldn't do it. And people told me, oh, all the designers are in Argentina. You want good designers in South America, go to Argentina. I'm like, well, I'm in Lima. And back then, this was in a different era where it wasn't all remote. So we wanted people to come to our office. I'm like, Buenos Aires doesn't help me. I need people in Lima to work with my developers. So that was sort of a failure at the time. We never really found those people. And I've had challenges in India as well, finding great designers. So in the Philippines, though, we found fantastic designers much more easily than we found them in certain other countries that we've worked in. And I can't explain why, but maybe there's better schooling for that there. I don't really know. But I've also noticed that we struggle a lot more in the Philippines to find great engineering talent. And now that we have all these other skills there, I've also tried to add, and we have it in other countries, but I've wanted people who could work, in the same location with our team in the Philippines doing web development, mobile development.
And similar to how we struggled in Peru to find designers, it's not that there aren't any out there, but it's much, much, much harder to find the engineering talent in the Philippines like we can find in other countries. So like I say, I can't really, I don't know the root causes of this, but I know that we really sense that in different countries, the pool of talent and the scale of skills is very different in terms of different specialties. And so that's why it's one reason why it's good to be in many countries, because you can say, all right, well, if the Philippines isn't such a good market for engineering, I guess we'll just get more of them in, Eastern Europe or in India or other places. But I just find that interesting. And again, maybe you have a thought as to why that is.
It's absolutely true what you're saying. All the agencies we know that employ online Filipino specialists or developers from Eastern Europe or call center folks that speak Spanish in Latin America, it's absolutely true. And I don't know exactly why, but from talking with other people, it seems like that there are these groups that emerge organically where someone is successful and everyone else wants to follow. For example, Sunny Ali in Pakistan, I think, is the number 4 operator of stores on Amazon. So there's only 3 Amazon stores that have more revenue than him. He's doing over $1 billion a year. And because he is a shining light in Pakistan, he has 1.4 million students that follow him that also want to learn how to do e-com and drop shipping and FBA and all those kinds of things, to Amazon SEO, Amazon ads, Amazon everything. Mm-hmm. And when I met with him in Vegas, we were at Dunkin' Donuts and he brought his executive team and we were hanging out. I said, why e-commerce? Of all the things that you could leverage the talent in Pakistan for. And he said, this is the thing that we've been winning at, and people are attracted to the thing that we're already doing. So my buddy Russ started Design Pickle, and he's mainly out of the Philippines. And Design Pickle is a $500 a month, $1,000 a month, like one task a day kind of, it's like Netflix, whatever. You remember the DVD.com, you used to be able to like check out 3 DVDs.
Right. You had to return a DVD to get another one.
Yeah. So he started Design Pickle to do this for designers out of the Philippines. And now if you're a designer in the Philippines, you know about Design Pickle because that's the place that's really hard to get into. And if you get a job there, it's, prestigious, and they have rigorous training. They have a great reputation. They have physical offices. So I feel that there are Sunny Ali's and Russ's in every single country. My buddy Benjamin, it's hard to say Eastern European names, Benjamin Kolanovic is the number 1 agency in Kosovo. Kosovo is a country that is not very old. It has only 2 million people, but he has 60% of the country's ad spend on Google and Facebook. And he learned just by studying our materials and things like this. And because he's the number 1 player in that country, he's in tight with the government. He's in tight with the universities. And so he set up campuses to be able to train up thousands of people in digital marketing to learn how to do Facebook ads. Like I was there and we had a conference where the prime minister and other folks came to, and I also spoke at this conference a few months ago, and KFC catered. And he was so successful with doing KFC with the mobile app and all that, that we caused KFC to run out of fried chicken, which I thought was hilarious in that country. And I said, holy moly, how do you, you have all the banks, you have all the retail guys, you freaking dominate in this country. Like, how are you so good? And I asked Benjamin about this, and he said, well, it's not because we're so good. It's because there is really no one else out there. And we just dominated where other people like selling SEO and PPC and building websites. But we clearly demonstrated, kind of like a From Digital, we demonstrated the gold standard, and that naturally drew in everyone else. So now Kosovo is killing it when it comes to his form of digital marketing. And so people say, well, why is Kosovo so strong at this particular form of SEO and PPC? It's because there was one guy who was a leader there. So when I look at each of these countries, I know the number 1 agency in India. He's my friend Vivek Bhargava. We've been friends for like 15 years. And he started it, he grew it, he learned how to do PPC and SEO together with me and Danny Sullivan, Rand Fishkin. I don't want to name drop, but all the originals. That's how he learned to grow in India. And he set up offices in Mumbai, in Pune, in Delhi, in other places. And he became the number 1 spender in the entire country of India on Google ads and on Facebook ads. And so when they look at people that do PPC and SEO, guess what? They came from his agency. They worked at his agency for a couple of years and then went off and started which of course pissed him off. He complained to me saying, I trained this guy and now he's a competitor. And like, how did he betray me? And Hey, you know what? I'm sure, all of us, you and I have both had that. But when I look at what's happening at the country level, what I see is whoever is the winner is the one who then spawns everyone else that wants to copy that winner.
Interesting. This thing you're describing, it reminds me of, at least here in the US, sometimes you'll be driving along, a road and all of a sudden you'll see like a Ford dealer. And then like 2 doors down, there's a Honda dealer. And then there's like a Chevy dealer and a Toyota dealer. And you're like, why are all the car dealerships in this one little stretch of road? Who decided this was car dealership central, Yeah. And I think it's similar. One car dealership went there and then someone else said, oh, well, there's a Toyota dealership. I should put my Ford dealership next to it. So the people, and next thing you know, it just has its own gravity and it's the place to put the dealerships. I don't know if that is exactly how it happens, but
it's usually one guy who owns all those.
Oh, is it? Well, maybe.
Yeah.
One guy buys up the whole area and just gets it's a license from maybe.
Yeah. My buddy, Nathaniel Stevens, he was a student at University of Pennsylvania, and he came up with an idea when he was a junior called NatPal. And I still worked at Yahoo at the time, and I coached him. And a few years later, he started the largest agency ever. But then he sold this company for $300 million as the largest player in digital. And the reason why I mentioned it is because his family owns a series of car dealerships all across the Northeast. So you name it, every brand, BMW and Ford or whatever.
Yeah.
His family owns all of these. And so there's something to be said about like the dominant player winning even further. So I fly a lot on Southwest Airlines, and
bad week.
Yeah, I had 3 flights canceled last week. I was supposed to.
Is that why you're in an RV there? Because Southwest can't get you anywhere?
I'm blaming Southwest because I was actually supposed to be in San Antonio today playing golf. But the airport, Midway Airport, if you ever go through there, there's a central food court in the middle there. All of those restaurants are owned by one guy. So there's that. Anyway, I don't mean to take over, monopolize our interview, but I think it's fascinating that there are these different labor pools that build distinct personalities, and it's almost like they bubble up to the country level. So the Philippines for call centers, for design, I think it ties into cultural things because the Filipino people are so happy and they love American culture. They generally speak good English. So it naturally translates into design and customer service and project management, not so much in engineering.
Yeah.
What questions do you wish, Howard, that people would ask you about your journey, about what you do, about how you think?
Oh man, I got to be honest. I don't need any questions. There's nothing I'm sitting around wishing people would ask. But where can I buy a copy of your book? That's a question I would like people to ask her. How can I hire your company? No, I'm joking. I don't know. I want people to ask the things that will be helpful to them. And I don't always know what that is, but I'm always happy to help.
Well, it's when you solve your number one problem, your number two problem gets a promotion. And the number one problem we see with agencies is they don't know how to operate. So that's why it's such an honor spending time with you, because most new agencies, they think the issue is driving sales. And yes, it's important to, just like when you had Universal Studios and that project, eventually would have a life cycle and you need more. But the most successful agencies, they know how to operate because that drives word of mouth, that builds relationships. I remember you introduced me to Michelle McKenna, who is the CIO at the NFL. And she was your first client at Universal a long time ago, right? And then since then, when she moved
with this company anyway.
Yeah. And so she moved to other companies and then she hired you. And the same thing happened for us. So our best clients, I had, one client who ran the marketing at George P. Johnson, which puts on, Dreamforce and these huge conferences in San Francisco. And then he became the CMO at the Golden State Warriors. And guess who was the first person that he called? And all the other social media agencies were saying, well, how did you get that as a client? Did you have like a special pitch? I'm like, no, I've known Kenny for 10 years before he ever became the CMO.
Yeah.
So I feel like you've had a lot of that. And a lot of people, maybe it's because of social media and influencer marketing or the young adults and Gen Z or whatever you want to call it. They feel like things can happen so quickly. But maybe you can talk about the power of relationships and how you learned how to organize and build relationships over a long time, whether it's Gemini or, going all the way back through school or taking care of these clients that create good old fashioned referrals for you.
In a way, I've not focused on building relationships so much as I've just always tried to figure out how could we create as much value as possible for whoever we were working with. So obviously in this business, first you got to get someone to trust you enough to hire you to do something. And that's a big hurdle, particularly when they don't know you and There's a lot of other people probably knocking on their door with a similar story about what they can do. I mean, look at that whole SEO PPC world. How many companies are there out there? And that's not what we do, but how many companies are there out there who are knocking on everyone's door who are completely incapable of doing a good job? I mean, I think my experience, because I've tried to hire some of these companies, the majority of them, they don't know what they're doing. So if you're a marketing director somewhere and you're getting these constant inquiries, how do you figure out which are the ones that actually can do a good job when that might only be 5 or 10% of all the messages you're getting in a given day? I sympathize with that person. That's a very difficult problem. Same problem I have in my house. If you want to find a plumber or an electrician or someone to do your roof, how do you find the good ones? And the answer is mostly, through referral or through your own personal experience. Like, oh, well, we worked with that guy before, just like you said. So it is very powerful when you really deliver for somebody and you really deliver the value for them. They remember that, because it's kind of a sad thing. But in our business, when you do what you said you were going to do and you deliver the value that you said you were going to deliver, that is unusual. It's a sad comment in a way. And so that alone is what makes people say when they go, just like if I had an electrician at this house that was really reliable and reasonably priced, and I felt I could trust them, and I moved to another house, I'd call them for that house. I wouldn't look for a new electrician for the new house. Why would I do that? It's hard to find someone that's reliable, So I think that basic principle of how, as soon as you get in with an account, you want to ask yourself, this is something that is something Tony Robbins talks about, and I think about it all the time. If you want to create more value for yourself, give more value to others. When you give more value to others, you're likely, in general, to get more value back yourself. It may not always happen transactionally in every situation. If I over deliver on one project and I send the bill, are they going to add a tip onto the bill? Probably not. But over time, I think that is what happens. And that means when we work on a project, there's a philosophy that we have, which is own the outcome. And very often we get hired to do part of something. Someone wants a great new e-commerce site, but they have a back end that's run by the IT department. They have maybe an ad agency that's doing part of, rarely is one company ever doing everything. Even if we're redesigning the whole website, we're working with various other parties. And so you can go into such a situation and think, okay, well, this is my part. And if I do my part per specifications, then, what more can I do? And that's reasonable. And by the way, that's how you write up a contract. You don't write up a contract and say, pay me this part and I'll be responsible for the entire outcome. Because of course, there are things that are beyond your control. But as soon as we get into an opportunity, we're thinking, okay, what is success for this client as a company? And what is success for this person, for this executive who's, got a bonus tied to something or other, who wants to get promoted to the next level, to SVP or to CMO or whatever. And what is victory for them? Try to make sure we really understand that, and then ask ourselves the question, what's everything we can do to help accomplish that result, accomplish that victory? And sometimes that influences the way we do our part of a project. Sometimes that leads to more work. Sometimes that makes us go to the client and say, we're doing this part, but there's this other thing that nobody seems to be focused on. And we're concerned that the lack of that could impair your victory. So this needs to be addressed. Do you want us to address it, or someone else could address it? But that's not primarily an upsell strategy, although it has that outcome often. It's not coming from there. It's coming from saying, we have to make this successful, and using our experience to look at the big picture and say, is this overall thing we're trying to get done on a track to success, or are there things standing in its way, and how do we make sure that this thing is maximally successful? And sometimes we go to clients and we say, this is a missing part, and they say, great. And they have one of the other companies do it, or they have their internal team do it. That is not a failure. That is great. That is because again, it comes from what's the main goal is to make sure the thing we're working on is successful. And again, I think that's another one of those things where you'd like to think that's how everybody approaches it, but I think apparently not. And so when someone sees that when they hire you, you take that kind of accountability, and not just accountability, but the results, you get to the results, then again, that makes you more, addictive or whatever else. They say, well, why would you not want that person again? If I hired a dentist that I felt wasn't just there to fill my cavity, but was really wanting to make sure that everything was always great with my teeth now and in the future, I'd be more likely to want to stick with that dentist versus any dentist can fill your cavity. Any dentist can give you a cleaning. If my insurance changed and my dentist was no longer covered, would I stay with my dentist anyway? Or would I say, oh, insurance coverage changed, I got to find a new dentist? That's the difference I think you get when you're really committed to your client's results.
Wow, that was a masterclass, Howard. That part right there of owning the outcome, because I think most agencies, they boil things down into checklists and they want to get out of the operations, and people are checking the boxes, but things fall through the cracks. So you providing that strategy layer, you infusing this with your team leads and program and project managers to make sure you own that outcome and find things that are outside the scope of what's in the contract, I think is incredible. And like you said, it's not a means to upsell, but it's to show that you're delivering, even though, things happen along the way. When you build websites and apps, you always there's contingencies, there's problems that you never could have predicted. Yeah. So I think that's fantastic, especially when you hire people, like you said, that are intelligent, that can spot these kinds of things instead of like, well, I need to check off these 5 boxes. But actually, if we don't do this one other thing that's not there, the project's going to be in jeopardy.
Yeah. And, it extends to another thing, which is that, there's this phrase that Debbie Newman, who works for me, she likes to use clients for life, right? We want clients for life, not just for the duration of their role at a given company. And so we have a lot of people like that. We have a lot of people, executives who are on their 3rd or even 4th company that they're working with us. But that also means when they're in between jobs, if someone's a CMO of a company is working with us and then the job ends for one reason or another, obviously at that level, there's all kinds of things that can cause the job to end. Person gets fed up and quits, the management changeover, whatever, they don't have, the new CEO gets brought in and they don't agree with their strategy, whatever. The first question we're asking is, how can we help? Can I be of help to you as you look for your next position? And again, it's like you could say, well, of course, because hopefully they'll get another big job somewhere else and there'll be a client there, and that's true. And that happens. But, it doesn't have to be that way. I've had people who left a client and they really wanted to go into like big consulting. And I used my contacts to get them a job at Accenture. I shouldn't say I got them the job. I didn't get them the job. They got the job themselves. But, I was trying to be helpful, and they're not going to hire me once they're at Accenture. But you know what? That person that I'm particularly thinking of stayed at Accenture for 18 months, hated it. And then they went to another big client and they did wind up hiring us back again. But again, it's not because we saw the chess 6 moves ahead. Right. It just comes from saying, again, it's just about adding more value. It's like, okay, how can I be, this person has been of value to me. How can I be of help to them without necessarily thinking about at that moment, oh, I know how this is going to come back to me.
You have been this way, Howard, in every single interaction we've had. You have consistently been even asking me, Dennis, how can I add value right now for you? What can I do for you? And that is so refreshing, because a lot of people say, oh, you need to add value. And the more value you add to them, the more you're going to get and succeed. But I'm really grateful for you, Howard. I mean, thank you for spending the time here on the Coach U Show and sharing with our community. There's no direct gain you're getting from doing this. This is just a benevolence, pay it forward, abundance mindset thing that you have to be able to help other people. I'm just so grateful that there are people like you that want to help other people instead of thinking like, well, if I help these other agencies grow, then there's less for me. So thank you so much, Howard.
My pleasure.
And how can people find you?
Well, I'm all over LinkedIn. I publish almost every day thought leadership content on LinkedIn. So you can certainly find me there. Just look for me, Howard Tiersky. My book, which we didn't really talk about, but I published this book, Winning Digital Customers. I love for people to check it out. It's on Amazon and wherever fine books are sold, certainly in the United States. But you can also go to the website for the book if you'd like to read the first chapter for free. And the book's website is just the same, winningdigitalcustomers.com. So if you're interested in learning more about the process and steps that we use at my agency for digital transformation and a bunch of stories of things that I've learned over 20 years of working with large brands, that's what the book is. And again, first chapter for free. The rest you got to pay for because we got to pay the printers, but there's links there to where you can buy it on Apple Books and Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all those kinds of places.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Winning Digital Customers by Howard Tiersky, CEO of the From Agency, sharing how he has grown his agency, how he operates. I hope you guys got a ton of value. Thank you so much. Go follow Howard. Go Google him. You'll see all the great content he has with his LinkedIn as the #1 search result on his name. Thank you so much, Howard, for being on the Coach U Show.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, and Happy New Year to you and all your audience.